I'm sure many of you, much like myself, got inspired to start forging and melting cans and whatnot by Grant Thompson's mini muffin forge. And well, it's a great start, sure. But if you plan on doing any considerable number of melts yourself, I would highly recommend doing this upgrade that I'm about to do right now. I say that because the style of forge lid and forge in general, really, that he uses just cannot stand up to the number of heatings somebody can expect if they plan to maintain this hobby. So I'm going to show you what I did to upgrade my forge. So let's get to it. And so what I'd recommend is you pick yourself up an old propane tank. You can find them at scrapyard or if you have them laying around, and you cut the top off. You can make a whole forge out of these, honestly, but since I have one already, I'm just going to take the top off and make a new forge lid out of it. And this way it'll last way longer than the old sand and plaster of Paris I've been using. I'm going to use some kaowool to line it, and it should last a long time and probably even be more efficient. Alright, first you're going to want to make sure it is empty, and to do that, on this one, it doesn't have the valve that there needs to be an insert to empty it, so I can just open it and you can see it still has a little bit of gas in there. So I'm just going to open it all the way up, let it sit for a second, just to make sure everything's out. So keep in mind, different propane tanks will have different systems on how to empty it. Like I said, this one doesn't have the input where you have to have an input into it to cause the gas to start coming out. Others, mostly newer ones, will have that, so you'll have to empty it another way. So now what I'm doing is I'm just filling the whole tank up with water, because wasting a little bit of time filling the tank with water is preferential to blowing myself up. So I'm just pumping it full of water. I realize this probably isn't the most efficient way to do it, but it's the only way I have. So, you know, just make it work however you can. That's that's the Backyard Foundry way. Speaking of, I've been thinking about changing the name of the channel, actually. So if you guys have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I should call her. You can usually just unscrew this tap here, but it's welded on mine, so I'm just gonna have to cut it off. Alright, so this is the kaowool I will be using. This sheet here was about 20 bucks, so it's not cheap, but it also won't break the bank. Got it on Amazon. Something also worthy of note is the manufacturer does warn prolonged exposure to the fibers from this blanket could potentially cause cancer.
So keep that in mind when working with this stuff, that you're going to want to wear gloves and probably a mask while doing it. And I will probably in the future coat my entire forge in a refractory cement as to not leave any fiber exposed. But it'll be fine for 1 or 2 firings for the short time. I've been doing it for months, honestly. So, you know, use me as your learning experience. So as you can see, I've got the new lid finished. The bolts I recognize are a little bit of a heat sink, but I don't think they'll be that big of an issue. They're not going to draw out too much heat from the forge, and I doubt we'll get to temperatures required to melt steel. But if I do, I'll figure something else out. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace this sand and plaster of Paris layer on the outside with more kaowool, and then eventually I'm going to cover it all in refractory cement. I'm going to keep this inner layer of kaowool. It's pretty rough, but the stuff's kind of expensive, so I really don't want to go wasting it, and once I cover it in the refractory cement, it should be fine. So yeah, let's get to it. Alright guys, there it is. It's not good looking by any means. No, not at all. But hopefully it gets the job done better than my previous one. And if you made it this far in the video, I thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.